Good afternoon and most welcome to 756 of the H series. We are recording here at the local library in Vårgårda, Sweden. A little community about 70 kilometers off the coast of West Coast. And I actually have something rather special today, a treat. Something that's been turning around in my head at least 20-25 years. And to be honest, I never had any good answer to the question. And neither, to be honest, did my teacher once upon a time. I think most of you by now have heard that in quantum physics, it's said that you can construct your own reality. Every time you observe something, you construct by letting the superposition collapsing by your own observance. That means that we are actually capable of creating our own reality. Do not forget that Schrödinger said, "I am God." And that meant that he was able to create everything he wanted. But how does that go together with modern everyday life and our assumptions about reality? If I could create whatever I want, I could, for instance, create myself 1,000,000 crowns now, and I will be on the flight to Hawaii or somewhere. Or I'll buy me a fantastic car with a 4-wheel drive and overdrive and all those things. And this question was never answered, and I've been looking and looking to get the result. And today I'm happy to announce that I have a working proposition. Whether it's true or not, for you to decide. But this is the first time I have some sort of proposition. So the name of the lecture is "Can I construct my own reality?" ? And that is the central tenet in quantum physics. It's just that we create reality ourselves. The knowledge we gain during this lecture series is that we know now, Libet is just one of the researchers, there are a lot of them. We know that we can't even control our body-mind complex. So that could actually be key to understanding how we construct reality. Because if we don't have control over the body-mind, or what we are thinking and what we are doing with our bodies, we are not in control of reality. But something bigger, the complex, the body-mind complex, can actually control. Can you please raise the camera a little bit just to help me with my neck position here? Much better, thank you very much. We also discussed Alexander, the great inventor of a technique that wants to help people to gain control of their own body-mind system. And the central tenet in Alexander technique is that we don't have that control. We don't have control over what we do with our bodies, neither do we have control over our thinking apparatus, as Alexander calls it. And that's the main problem. That's the cause of misuse, according to Alexander. So the solution could be, if we could have conscious control, CC, as Alexander calls it, then the quantum position follows. And I think Alexander would agree on that. And I had some discussions about this theme, and I got some first positive answers for this possibility. One could say it goes like a red thread through all our history that we don't have control, at least of a part of our body and our mind. Those things were called by already the ancient as emotions or similar names. Those were uncontrollable. And you see here, if one part is uncontrollable, it is rather hard to say that any part is controllable, because that makes actually, oddly enough, although Plato wanted it to be the opposite, but what happens is that rationality becomes slave under emotions. What he wanted to do is establish rationality as something higher than emotions. But he admitted, and he let into his philosophy, that emotions we could not have any control over, and thereby it deconstructs itself. So he's using an idea of uncontrollability to establish something that is smaller and dependent on not being emotions. So we have a real problem in Western history, Western ideological history. And this has shaped us. They shape what we do. We do different things thanks to that. Something that, for instance, is pointed out by Heidegger. We don't have what he say, Sorge. We don't have the intimacy with reality. We don't treat everything as something for us. We are obsessed by things not being for us, being other, being forehanded, distant. And distancing could actually be drawn. And I say that's a literal distance. It goes from the body up to the head. And this distance is having its effect. It's completely odd. No other culture has done this. And I say this is rather a metaphor for not having control. To say that reality is something other than myself. And this is establishing very, very deep, a very deep cleft between what is me and what is the surrounding reality. And even towards my body. This odd way of raising consciousness, what is subjective, to the head, is nothing other than losing the world and ourselves. This is the reason for us not having contact with our bodies in the West. This is the reason why we don't coordinate our movements. This is the reason that we think habitually, whereas in other cultures they control their thinking. They let the thinking go in a certain direction. They plan things. We are stuck in almost, very good description of this is actually something philosophically put forward, which is rather ridiculous, but is still a metaphor. And that is the theory of brain in the vat. An idea that, for instance, Searle, the American philosopher, thought was apt, that we are completely closed off from the world, and we could actually, potentially, be brains in vats. No connection to the world whatsoever. This is rather scary. But amazingly enough, it's a rather good picture how it is. Because this was stated already by Plato. To say that a great part, maybe half, doesn't matter if it's half, 2/3 or 1/3, one half of our system, it's not accessible for us. And those are the emotions. And it's a little bit like saying to a horse, you can do whatever you want, but between 5 and 6 o'clock in the evenings, I want to ride you. That won't work. The discipline needs to be there all day. Everybody who rode a horse would say, I would like to ride such a horse. We cannot gain control in certain small instances when we ourselves want that, when we established a habit of not being in control. The habit becomes real because we repeat it so often. And that's the example with the horse. A horse that's only disciplined 1 hour a day is not a disciplined horse. It's a wild horse. It could do whatever it wants when you try to ride it. And scary enough, these things have happened when people don't know about horses. They train them only when they use them. It will not work. And we do the same thing. We establish the moment we wake up until the moment we go to sleep an idea in our system, I don't have any control over myself. What happens, happens. And that, of course, becomes in the end self-evident and self-confirmatory. All habits are self-confirmatory. Do them often enough and they become direct responses. And that was the point of Mrs. Feldman. She said that emotions are not ingrained in our systems. There's something we are habitually doing, but they are decided by us. So some small part of us has somewhere in history and also during the day when it comes to an individual decided, I don't have control. I just react to things. Comes some stimuli, I react to that. I get frightened, I get angry, I get curious. It doesn't matter. This is part and parcel of the Western culture. And it's so completely different, for instance, when you compare to the Eastern countries. When they learn self-discipline from the moment they're born, more or less. And that's another thing. We know now, only to be surrounded by people with a certain attitude will affect the baby. And that happens almost the instant the baby is born. It does actually happen before it's born. We now know the moment the baby is born, it's already, so to say, conditioned by its surrounding reality through the stomach of the mother, the womb of the mother. The magnitude of this idea makes my mouth dry like a desert. Sorry about that. And this is also the very point of Sir Roger Federer in his example, this great lecture he held on his 90th birthday this year, which is almost coming to a close in the beginning of August. It was amazing. He explained how a tennis player, presumed tennis player, Roger Federer, actually constructed reality by his own will, by being in control over his body-mind system, one might add. Roger Federer has that control without a doubt. He does already construct his reality. The quantum physics tenets are no surprise to him. Of course, he has not verbalized them, but in his body-mind system, he already have the habit of controlling reality. It's obvious. Not a single ball that he hits has he seen. He hasn't even felt it. He constructs it. That's the only way of hitting a ball. You can never perceive it before you hit it. Absolutely impossible. Therefore, you have to construct a reality where you hit the ball. That's absolutely necessary. You cannot wait to the moment and try to construct the world when you're supposed to hit the ball. That's too late. It needs to be done before. And we have the figures for that. We know that from neurology. We know that's the case. You need to have an imagery of what you're going to do. That is going to be reality. And this is actually a segue into starting to have control over your own reality. And of course, the possibilities by that are nothing short of miraculous. This is miracle. This is miracle in living. And as we already started in this series, now the effects are coming. We are actually changing our thinking habits. We've been doing it now for several years actually. But the first thing is to ease up the idea that we are not in control. And then we started with Plato, Aristotle. We have looked at modern thinking. Many neurologists doesn't see modern thinking as thinking at all. It's just pure reactions, stimuli and response, predetermined ideas that's not fitting what we want, won't do the trick. We can relearn. And that's also something that neurology now proven. And often it takes its name from the brain research, and it's called plasticity there. But you can also see it as moldability, that your mind and your body is moldable. You can do whatever you want with it, but you need to learn how to control your responses, because you are responsible for all your responses. No one else. You don't have ingrained reactions. They are put there by you. And that means you have the capacity to change them. And now I think it's obvious why we have to start with philosophers. The ones who were themselves suffering from the idea of they are not in control of reality. Those are the ones who taught us we're not. And that's the first step. First step is to really question that, look into it deeply. And of course, quantum physics is fantastic, because in the early 20th, last century, it was proven we construct reality. And that fact won't change. Nothing could change that fact. It means that we are in a rather magnificent position. That makes us lords of reality. And whether we choose to take that responsibility or honor, I would say, or opportunity, it's up to ourselves. And that leads me into the second part of the argument, how to do it. This is how I'm trying here to tie a knot between quantum mechanics and what we do on a regular basis. This plasticity that our system has, moldability, will yield for changes in habits. If we change our habits, what we actually do on a daily basis. The exact movements of my body, which is so much easier to control than my thoughts. In the end, the thoughts will follow. You will change your thinking habits by changing your way of moving. And here, once again, I get back to Heidegger. We in the West, we think, thanks to Plato, thanks to loads of philosophers, our whole zeitgeist, as Kalle calls it, which is very good, we have the idea that the exterior world is completely uninteresting. We just ignore it, like we ignore our bodies. This is just something I walk around in. This has nothing of interest. And this was established so fine with Plato. That's why I like him. He draws his conclusion to the absurdity that it becomes, and say that we're locked up in a cave and we don't have any connection to reality whatsoever. And that's what he felt himself. He did not have a good connection to himself. He was not an acting person in life. And his model for how to rule a city-state like Syracuse was a disaster. There's good reasons for that, because his philosophy says you don't have control. And what you need to do in a state is to control it. Change your habits must start with a change of looking at the world. As long as we have the Platonic idea that the world is completely uninteresting, it will be very hard to change our habits, because it's the togetherness with the world acting as Zug. How we treat the world will affect our habits. The world is the point here. This is the big part of the second part of the argument. And that's the world needs to come into the picture, because we don't take care of the world. There's a big difference. We don't care about the Zug, the tyg as we say in Swedish. English is harder to translate, but the things we are in contact with. And that goes actually both for what we call material dead things and living bodies. We need to re-establish or grace, admiration for the material world, because we are part and parcel of the material world. And you hear this duality that we say, myself has nothing to do with this outside myself. That's where it starts, the big problem. Because if you have that in head, you will stop treating things around you in a respectful way. And every time you do that, you don't control your body and you don't control your reality, because this is part of our reality. This is actually part of our reality, even though it's been so completely denied by everyone, I would say, up to quantum mechanics. Heidegger was one of those few that meant that we are in the world, literally. And our denial of that is causing the problems for us personally. There's nothing problematic with the world in itself. Not even das man or any other thing. But it's our relationship to it that we make problematic. Caring about the world. This is something Heidegger called Sorge. And I love that expression, because it has all the tonality of caring, compassion, and being careful, appreciative, delicate. And something that inspired Heidegger was actually the Cha no Yu. Need to write that up. It can hardly be seen here. Cha no Yu. Cha no Yu is the celebration of the material world. It's called tea ceremony. And it means that you spend a very long time handling objects in the most delicate way, even though they are cracked, even though they are old. And it's the delicacy in doing this that transforms you. It's the transformative process, because every time you handle something brutish and use brutishness as your tool, you will affect your body-mind system. That would tell you that you distance yourself from reality, that there is less Sorge. You need the intimacy that is Sorge. You can even write that up, maybe this pen is better. No need to extra photograph it, but what we're looking for is intimacy. Closeness, not distance. We need to get closer to the material world, because it is together with the material world we do all our action. We don't do anything outside the material world. And we know from quantum mechanics there is no separation from a certain point of view between mind and matter. They're actually the same thing. So you can understand them maybe a bit. If you took that, for instance, Gnostic view, it was a religious movement that said everything of the world was evil. That will affect you gravely. You would lose the control over your mind-body in the end. If you do it, if you think it, and if you do it many times a day. And we know that's the changing thing. We unconsciously, or at least the Gnostic unconsciously, did that over and over again until it was established in their bodily system that reality didn't mean anything to them. Nothing. And they were lost when the Crusaders came to sort of punish them or exterminate, it was a better word. That's what happened in the end. They were completely lost because they didn't care about reality. They could have defended themselves, but since reality was evil, they were so out of hand, they were so completely lost in their own world. And they, oddly enough, I would say, were extremely far from God and everything spiritual. In the process of getting rid of the material world, they got rid of everything sacred. And that's what duality is. If you don't care about the material, you will also not care about the spiritual, because they are coming together. And it's no wonder that everything in our modern world, in this, you often say, secularized world, everything has become more horrible somehow. Objects are not looking nice anymore. Buildings are not looking nice. They are square, they lack aesthetics, they lack space, they lack inspiration, they lack air, they lack spirituality. Like going into Gothic church, like the one you can find in Granada, for instance. You see the ore, you feel everything. That is gone now. Low ceiling, you shut out the material world. You mistreat the material world. And thereby you are gravely mistreating everything spiritual. You are punishing your relationship with God and with your own soul. And you lose contact with your mind-body system, because the body is close to the material. This is my incarnation. Maybe a little bit rounder incarnation after Christmas and all the Christmas ham, but this is my incarnation, and it is smack down in reality. This is my closest connection to the material, and actually my body is material. And by making a cleft there, I don't have any control of anything whatsoever. But I need to practice that. I need to practice that every day, like the Gnostic. I need to repeat it every day, several times. I don't have any contact to reality. I don't care about reality. And you need to do it. They were sloppy, the Gnostics. They were not clean, and they didn't have nice houses. Already in that time, when the houses usually were nice, they didn't even shave, like I haven't done either. Maybe I'm agnostic now during Christmas. And it's widely interesting, this distrust of all matter. And it leads to really weird conclusions that are trying to be, so to speak, dualistic. Because we have then only one substance, we are marginalizing one substance, where the Gnostic was marginalizing the material side. Modern people are actually marginalizing the spiritual, the conscious side, the control side. And what could be worse? Where do we find, who do we find in the opposite polarity of Plato? Let's see, we have Plato here. For him, everything was more or less spiritual only, one could say, because the ideas were not material, not at all. He didn't even like things to be material. It should be ideas only. And now we're gone to the other end. And who do we find here, sitting here?
Is it Aristotle or Heidegger?
I'd say in the other end we find Daniel Dennett. Because to him, nothing, not even what we usually acknowledge in daily life, a small consciousness. I think most people think we have some sort of consciousness, and they think it's going to die when we die.
You're making a mistake, because you should place Daniel Dennett here, further away from reality. And here you should place Aristotle and Heidegger, because this is a little bit misleading.
No, wait until the point hits. Because I would say they are both denying reality, because you need both spiritual and material to get closer to reality.
Okay.
And whereas I always thought they were completely different, I realized they're not. They're actually exactly the same. Exactly the same. And Plato is denying every material thing. Daniel Dennett is denying to the absurdity that he doesn't even exist. He says that. So this goes to show there is actually no difference in between the two. There's just two sides of exactly the same mistake. And that's not understanding that this yin and yang symbol, or the complementarity as it's called in quantum mechanics, is completely true. And once you try to get rid of the material, the body, which we already started before Plato, which already started with a distancing from material, literally went up in the head. A very, very odd way of going about, to say the body is not part of reality. I wonder really here, and you are more than welcome to respond to this, write something on YouTube or write me, has this ever happened in any other culture at all? Because it's so incredibly weird, so different from everything, and it's completely by chance. Because the idea of putting consciousness in the head, you have to remember, was long before we know anything about the brain. Nobody thinks before knowing about the brain. It should be situated here. And what it was in the end was the denial of the two things of reality. To a great disaster. And both these people, without a doubt, had lost all control in their own lives. If you see Daniel Dennett, he moves about in the most awful way. He shows in every grain of his makeup, he repeats to himself daily, this is not real, this is not real. And then he does it, because you need to do it, because to make it true. You need to handle things around you in a brutish way. And he treats people rather bad. It's gone worse. By insulting them, by being mad, by being angry, not taking care of himself. I don't know how much he weighs this day, but it's like me after 50 Christmases. It's obvious in his movement. He has an ingrained idea that he repeated thousands, 100,000s of times until it became true for him. Both Plato and Daniel Dennett, and everybody who's in between here, has done the same thing. Quantum mechanics shows us we can actually gain control by doing things that are delicate and start treating matter as something sacred, because it is sacred. And obviously, we don't think it's sacred when we do things like this. Look at this horrible piece of furniture. This is a modern attire. It wouldn't be suitable for anyone in the Renaissance to sit on. So we are convincing ourselves that neither the soul or the body exist, and we do it by our action. That's where it starts, because when we do something, we change our thinking. But you can never change your thinking from inside. It has to come from the outside. You need, in the end, to do the two things at the same time. Need to do your mental, psychic, spiritual thing at the same time you do your bodily movements. And by doing that, you are reinforcing the habit to become very, very strong by repetition. And this is why Plato thought emotions were directly, because wherever he went out, he saw the same reactions. Yes, in Greece, but if he would have gone to Egypt, the reactions wouldn't have been the same. And if it would have gone further, it would be completely different. And there are many cultures, I can tell you, where an angry face, not very good with faces, but an angry face, maybe Kalle, you can show us an angry face. You're much gooder with your expressions. Yes, very good. That face is not seen as anger in, for instance, culture in Africa. In Namibia, that maybe the fist, that was a little bit too much, but your face wouldn't be seen as anger. Can you imagine? Now you see, this is caused by habit. It's not an instinctive reaction to get angry. And we get tricked by babies as well. But babies are the favorite objects of the neurologists today, and they don't show up emotions at all. They only have two states. Everything you see in the baby is coming from the parents. Isn't that amazing? Who would have thought about this thing? Well, no one had. Thank God we know it now. And this makes a whole difference. And it makes a possibility to change our lives by doing other things at the same time, thinking it. Then everything can be changed. My reaction of getting angry this morning for it being slippery on the pavement, I could change that and see it like an opportunity to try my tires or something. Everything can be changed. You can change your health. And this is also the reason why it's been so hard for so many Alexander teachers, Feldenkrais teachers, for instance, as well, to change their students and even to change themselves. Because this needs to be repeated many times together with matter, together with this sacred substance, I would say. Yeah, I think that's quite enough for this time. I will get back to the subject, but this is my first tryout of argument, how we can control the world. And I bid you a very pleasant afternoon, and I say thank you very much.
Thank you.